We have big news. We have exciting news for you. Tell them what it is, Serena.
We are super excited to announce that we are starting our first membership this January 2024.
Yay! Membership.
So we're excited to let you know that we will be hosting a monthly membership where when you join, you will be
with us live in a Zoom room once a month for a workshop like we just hosted. It's going to be a workshop like that, one topic each month, a different topic. You might even help us come up with the following month's topic from inside our membership. Super excited to meet you. It was so fun meeting a few of you in our inaugural workshop. So we're really looking forward to that.
And when you are a member, you will also be receiving a monthly newsletter where I'm going to be a little more intimate and I'll be sharing the things that are working and the things that aren't working for me.
Yeah, like taking a tool that you've learned from the podcast and how you're implementing it and how well that worked, or maybe if it didn't work. And then Amma can put in my 2 bits worth. We'll see how that goes. But a membership newsletter and a membership live Zoom room workshop starting in January 2024. Can sign up through our Patreon link in the show notes, yeah?
Yes, everything will be in the show notes, and we can't wait to see you there, listeners.
We can't wait. Yay!
Hey, mamas. So, next Sunday is Grandparents' Day, or this Sunday, September 11th. It's the first Sunday after Labor Day, is when we celebrate Grandparents' Day. And we wanted to reshare episode 9, which was about embracing our elders. We just wanted to talk about it, have you go through memory lane. We go through memory lane in this episode. And we hope that you think about this and encouraging those relationships between your kids and their grandparents, because it really is such a beautiful bond. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the We Are the Village Parenting Podcast.
Hi, my name is Serena, mother to 2 little ones.
And hi, I'm Lisa, also known as the Singing Amma. Amma means grandmother in Icelandic. I am a mama and an Amma.
In this podcast, I am learning to practice gentle, attachment-focused parenting. Amma Lisa is here to teach us why it's vital to our children's development and well-being.
And I come to the village with a background in early childhood education. I have been coaching and supporting parents along their parenting journeys for over 35 years. Together, we explore some easy to implement skills you can add to your parenting tool belt to help you create a happy, thriving family.
We invite you to grab your latte
or your tea
and come sit around the proverbial ancient fire with us each week.
When we come together to have a conversation where we'll be keeping it real, keeping it raw, right here with you in the wonderful world of all things parenting.
Hello. So today we're going to be having a conversation about the importance of having elders in our kids' lives and the importance of kids in our elders' lives. And I'd like to have this discussion today because we just lost somebody that we were close to. And I felt like my daughter brought her a lot of happiness and really gave her some purpose in life, since she didn't have her kids, she didn't have her siblings anymore. I know my daughter brought her a lot of happiness, and I know having my grandparents in my life, having my great grandmother in my life benefited me a lot. So I just like to remind our village to embrace our elders and how we can connect with them and why it's important.
So good. It's so wonderful that your baby, up until she was 1.5, had this elder who was in her 90s, right?
Yeah, she would have been 98 this year. She had just turned 97 and a half.
Wow. Yeah. And to have that person in her life, no relation to you by blood or anything, but by proximity, right? She lived near you. So beautiful for both of them and for you. So what are some of the things that you remember about your own grandparents or great grandparent? You said you had a great grandparent too,
Yeah,
right?
my bachi, my grandma's mother. I remember when she was around, and I used to go to my grandparents' house almost every weekend. And I remember going into Bachi's room and sleeping with her. And I don't remember everything, but I remember her always embracing me and just,
How old were you when you lost her? When
I
she
was
died?
a baby, maybe 2
Oh, but you have
maximum.
memories still,
Yeah.
even though you only had her for the first 2 or 3 years.
If I wasn't 2, maybe I was 3. But I remember being in her room, wanting to be in her room, wanting to sleep with my bachi.
Wow, so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I corrected myself because I heard myself say when you lost her. And so then I said when she died, because one of the things that I know about talking to our children about death, and I was encouraging Serena just before we jumped on to record this episode to actually say to your 18-month-old child that this elder in your life has now died. And it's so important just to use the plain actual language around death and not to use euphemisms, just to pop that in there. Because if we say, we lost grandpa, or grandma went to sleep and she's not going to wake up again. I mean, it can develop night fears and terrors, which have become very real for many children. And, the fear of losing anybody else that might just get quote unquote lost. So I just wanted to pop that in because I heard myself say lost and I retract that.
But yeah, I definitely remember her embracing me and the love that she had for me. And I remember loving her back a lot.
Amazing. I had my 2 grandmothers, my mom's mom and my dad's mom, in my life. My mom's mom died when I was 16, and my dad's mom, I already had, my daughter was 5 when my dad's mom died. But when you said going into the bedroom and sleeping with your great grandmother, one of the things that popped into my mind, and this is really funny, but it's one of the real raw truths that the memory that I had was going in to sleep with my amma, my dad's mom. My avi, my grandpa, would always go upstairs and sleep in a spare room when I was over because I love sleeping with my amma. And what I remember, one of the things I remember was her getting undressed. And, I was a little girl, whatever. That was probably, I don't know if she would do that with her boy grandchildren, probably not, but she would get undressed. And I remember seeing her old body and how that looked and where her breasts were on her body, and she had had 6 children and nursed them all, and and the weight that she carried and all those different, just the physical body that she had as an elder. And so as I'm aging, I'm now 60, I'm like, oh, I mean, I don't look like I'm 80 or 90, but my body is changing.
Yeah.
And like, if we hide that away from children, then as they age, they don't know that what their body's going through is actually normal and actually just what happens to a female body as it ages.
Yeah.
Or one of the possibilities of what might happen. Not, I mean, everybody is different, of course, but that was really something that it was just sort of so natural. And it really felt to me, there's a real feeling of, this is my village, this is my amma getting undressed at night in front of me. And then the other thing that I remember about tucking in and sleeping with her was, she was like, okay, now let's spoon. I'm like, what does that even mean? So she taught me what spooning meant. And then we just had this massive giggle fit. Like, I was just like, spoons. And we were giggling like little girls. And that was one of my favorite snuggled in memories with her too.
Yeah. With my grandparents, I remember sleeping with them as well. My bachi and my grandparents. And
yeah,
it's the best.
Yeah. Yeah. I even slept with my Nana who had severe rheumatoid and was in arthritis and was in a lot of pain and discomfort, but she still wanted me to snuggle in with her. And I
Mm,
did. And it was really, those are very precious memories too. And when I developed rheumatoid, when I was in my 30s and I was in extreme pain, I often remembered the sort of painful sounds she would make at night. And I would
mm,
go, oh, right, this is what she was experiencing. So even that, even her just being able to be real with me about that actually, in a way, helped me decades later when I had to experience the same kind of pain, you know?
yeah.
And that in itself is a beautiful gift, you know? So
Yeah, this conversation is bringing up so many memories now. Just like when I would sleep with my dad's mom, I remember the smell of the medicine that she would put on. Like it wasn't Vicks, but something that
mm,
I can
a
smell, and that was like my association with like going to sleep with her. Is the
right.
medicine. And then my grandma, she'd always put me over the sink and she'd let me stand on a stool and she'd take my shirt off and wash my face. Just the smell of the washcloth. It always smelled so fresh and clean, and it was great memories.
Yeah, so nice. And the memories for me that I have with my grandparents, I had my one grandfather, my Avi. Um, they're really, really special. And so, you know, for those people who are able to be near their parents and so their children have the grandparents nearby or visit them whenever however often you can, I think it's so important. It's so important for development, you know, of humans. Just and if they're not nearby, to have other elders in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, when we were researching this together, we were looking at how the importance of um, those interactions between the very young and the older or the very old. So yeah, you talked about your daughter, you know, bringing smiles and a sense of purpose to the elder
Yeah.
that you just lost, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which, for people who don't know, which is the majority probably, but she was my landlady. I moved in at 21. I'm going to be 27 this year. So I've been there for a while. And honestly, the first couple years I was single, living my life, and I don't remember interacting with her as much. I remember going to the grocery store and calling her to see if she needed something, but it wasn't until I had my daughter that we got closer, and she would call me to just come down with my daughter. She always wanted to see her. The only time I really saw her smiling and laughing was when she was with my daughter, and
Mm.
she taught my daughter how to say I love you, which is one of the best memories.
Aw,
Not gonna
yeah.
cry.
Of course. That is so sweet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but she just lit up whenever she would see my daughter, and
Mhm.
I felt so happy that my daughter can make somebody else that happy.
Yes. Yeah. Especially somebody, she was living alone, right?
Yeah.
She didn't have a lot of family close by. She didn't have family that had little ones that came around, right?
No.
So your little one was the light in her life, it sounds like, this past year and a half. That's so, what a beautiful gift you
Yeah.
gave her in this last couple of years of her life. Wow.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
Sundays we would spend Sundays with her, and we try to go out to the park, and she she was 97, so I'd have to keep an eye on her and on my little one, but
Right.
she'd always be like, she's sitting on the chair, she's standing on the chair, watch her. I'm like, she's fine. She can fall. You can't fall. So don't get up and go for her. But she
Right.
she would get up and dance, she'd sing to her, and there was just so much light in her eyes when she would be around my daughter. And it also, in that time when they're interacting, the kids absorb the wisdom of the elders,
Hmm.
and they grew up in a different, like
Era. Yeah.
being around my grandparents is so different than being around my parents, and just the way they speak, it makes you a little more wholesome
Mm.
because you have a little bit more of the past. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. Yeah, a more rounded experience of life, right?
I know my grandpa, when I would be with him, he'd either take me to the museum, he'd take me fishing, he'd take me kayaking. And then I was able to take my friends kayaking. I took my husband kayaking. That's the first time he ever went kayaking. And I learned how to put bait on a hook to go fishing. Just all those little things helped round me out.
That's one of the top things that everybody talks about in the importance of having young children in elders' lives, is that exchange of learning new skills, right?
Yeah.
And learning new things. And for me, the one that stands out is with my Amma, learning how to make our traditional Icelandic Christmas cake called vinaterta. And I made it this Christmas. I had to go and stay with my stepmom because I don't have the space where I'm living this year or anything that I need to make it with. But one of my favorite things about, not only did I learn how to make this fairly time consuming cake from my Amma, who'd learned it from her mom and her Amma probably as well. But it was a time that she and I sat and she told me stories.
Yeah.
She would tell me amazing stories, and I wish I had asked a whole bunch more questions, actually. You were saying before we started recording too, Serena, about what did you do personally too, with your grandparents? You actually asked them questions, right?
Oh yeah, I ask my grandma questions all the time because I am aware of that. Like, I don't want to say when it's too late, I wish I knew this. So when I am with my grandparents, and they're very open, elders love talking about their life. So you'll make them so happy by asking them any question. And I always love having those conversations with my grandma. And 2 years ago, I had said to my mom and my aunt, let's put together some questions to ask grandma and grandpa over Christmas. We didn't get to it, but it was a good idea.
Oh yeah, it's a good idea. I actually wrote a song about my Amma's life, and one verse says, though her hands were worn and weathered, she looked back proud on her long life. She spoke fondly of her memories from when she was a pioneering wife. And it goes into how they carried water up from the lake and, all this stuff. But she looked back so fondly on years that we in our modern easy lives of electricity and heat at the flick of a switch for most people, like we would look back and think, oh, that was such a hard life. And it was hard, but boy, she just lit up when she talked about it. Yeah, I mean, as much as I did get some stories and spend time interested in my grandparents' lives, there are so many things now that I wish I knew, or I wish I had asked, or more just being able to sit down and have a conversation with them. And that was the other thing I thought about too, is how, with my Nana, she was in a wheelchair the years that I knew her, up until I was 16 when she died. We played card games a lot. And the card games and board games and things like that, I think they're so important, more than sitting down in front of a television or a computer and watching something together, because you're actually interacting when you're playing a game, whereas you're just being passive if you're just sitting there watching something together, or sitting the kids in front of something and watching it.
I remember once I was speaking to my grandpa and I said her to my grandpa in front of my grandma, and that was a big no-no. I barely remember ever getting in trouble, but I remember when I referred to my grandma as her, I was in big trouble. So
what should you have referred to her as?
Grandma.
Oh, okay.
In front of her, in front of my grandmother.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So it was just me learning a little bit more about the respectful way to speak. And I really think being around the elderly helps you learn a lot in so many ways. And having kids around elders really helps elders feel special and happy, bring them joy, bring them purpose, longevity.
Yeah. And what you were saying there too about what you should call your grandma in front of her. Um, there's differences if there are cultural differences. If your grandparents happen to be of a different culture from a different country, they're going to bring those cultural ways of being in as well. And it's not just going to be an American way of doing things or a Canadian way of doing things. It's going
Yes.
to be what they bring from their country and from their upbringing. And whether or not we want to live that way in our lives or raise our children that way, with all of those kinds of rules of how to be polite and things, it's really great, like you say, to respect that that's who they are, that's the culture they come from, that's what they need for them to feel comfortable and at ease with us, and that's the mutual respect, like you say, is just so important.
Yeah.
And there's so much to learn. And so I just wanted to say, like, for you who are listening, if you or your children are at a loss of what they might do with the grandparents, brainstorming some ideas together. If they like to sing songs, if they like to play instruments, if they like to act or, just do some kind of a performance in some way, that can be really fun for the elder people to watch. And I know my Avi used to always want me to play my guitar when I played guitar as a teenager and young adult. And his favorite song was "Let It Be."
Oh.
I know. He made me play it every time I came over. Play "Let It Be." Play "Let It Be." I was like, okay. And so that can be, and that's when I was a teenager, right? So, but also then there's younger children or teenagers, whoever can read out loud to their grandparents. They can play cards with them, play board games with them. And my Amma, she was a knitter, she was a crocheter, she was a sewer. I had my first sewing lesson actually sitting on my Amma's knee, and she helped guide my hands to guide the fabric through the sewing machine for the first time.
Yeah.
And told me, how careful you have to be so that needle does not go through your finger. And I'll tell you, I never forgot that lesson. I never had a needle go through my finger, not even close. And I also I used to do the laundry with her when she had a Ringer washer machine.
Oh, wow.
On the porch. Yeah. And so the wash, you'd put the wash in and it was electric. So it would do its own and wash the clothing in there. But then you had to put it through the wringer to squeeze all the water out. And she told me about having hands and arms get pulled into the wringer if you're not careful.
Wow.
So yeah. And it's just, yeah, I love it. To me, it's a living history. And
Yes.
I believe that it lives inside our bodies. Like we are our genetics, right? It does. We carry the genetics with us and the genetic memories, I think. And now there's work being done about ancestral healing that people are doing and things because of traumas that happened in their ancestors' lives, so we do, whether you believe that or not, but we do carry the genetic coding of our bloodlines. So, acknowledging the history, respecting the history, and just being interested in being with those who are in our lives and living history.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, I think, is like now my grandparents, they moved down south, they retired. So that's the thing, moving when you retire. And that's a huge part of separating your village. And
Mhm.
it's really
Yeah.
sad to me because my abuela taught me how to sew. I always watched both my grandmas. They ironed everything. And that's so
Mhm.
different from now. But now my
Mhm.
husband's like, can you iron my shirt 5 minutes before we're going out? And I'm like, "Ugh." But just knowing that that's how my grandparents did it, and fishing, kayaking. My grandpa was a Boy Scout and he just taught me so many life skills, and even the language. My grandma spoke Spanish and she didn't speak English. So I had to learn Spanish. And if it wasn't for my abuela, I wouldn't be speaking Spanish. And I'm so grateful that I speak Spanish.
Mhm.
But if I wasn't forced to have to spend so much time with my grandparents, and forced in a good way,
Mhm.
like I'm happy that I had the opportunity to spend so much time with my grandparents. And thankfully I had my grandma from my dad's side and both grandparents on my mom's side. But I mean, even if you don't have grandparents, if they had siblings, and bringing your kids around their aunts and uncles,
And
that
the
would,
great aunties and great uncles and yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the great
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah. The great ones.
They're
Yeah.
great for a reason.
Well, after my dad died, I spent more time with his sister who lived near me. And that time with her became so much more precious after I had lost my dad. And then by then I was like, okay, now I need to ask all the questions because she was the last one carrying all those answers, and so I spent a lot of time with her. And another memory that I had when you were talking about just spending time with our elders, my Amma, of course, as young woman, you would get china teacups, were a classic kind of wedding gift or anniversary gift or whatever. And she had this beautiful selection of china teacups. And so she and I would always have tea in the china teacups and we would sit down together and just talk. And I think I was the last person that would, if she would have her women friends over the course of her life, they would have tea together in their china cups. But mostly they were all coffee drinkers because they were Icelandic. But I've always been a tea drinker. But I think I was the last person who always wanted to have tea in the china teacups. And so just the little rituals like that too, like find that precious thing, that little gem that you can share with that elder, that your child can share with that elder. What is it? What interests does the elder have that you could meet on and
Mhm.
share that time? Maybe it's cooking. You said that your daughter's grandmother, the mother-in-law, is cooking always with the girls, right?
Yeah.
And they're tiny still, but they're growing up watching their grandmother. And what do they call her?
Abuela, Abu,
Oh, abuela,
Abu.
abu.
Yeah, short for abuela.
It's short for abuela. Okay.
For them.
So that abuela is teaching some of her traditional food recipes in just making it with them, whether they're helping or not. My oldest grandson was uh a year, yeah, just past, oh yeah, a year and a half, I guess, when we made our first vinaterte together, the Icelandic that I learned from my Amma, and now he was learning it from me. So and rolling out the dough, you were talking about your little one earlier about rolling out the dough. The Oela is doing, and he loves rolling out the dough for the
Yeah.
vinaterte, even when he was tiny like that, right? And so, yeah, passing those things on. As a grandparent myself, too, I just wanted to say, I mean, I don't really think of myself as an elder yet. I feel quite young still, but probably one of my favorite memories was going with my Amma when I was a young woman. We went back east to where she grew up and we stayed with her auntie, who was like her favorite person. And I didn't know at the time that auntie had been born in Iceland and came across 1887, I think they came across, as a 9-year-old or 11-year-old girl, I think she was. Anyway, we went walking across the street from where Auntie Mata lived to have some supper at the one little restaurant in the tiny little town in Manitoba she lived in. And, and we're walking across the street, and there's 92-year-old Auntie Mata, 81-year-old Amma, and me, 29 or something like that. And we're walking very slowly across the street, and the two elders are like, "Can you believe how slowly we walk now?" The other one says, "I don't even understand. I only feel 20 inside my head." And then they talked about how each of us has an age that we think we are for the rest of our lives. And mine is 19, and one of them was 20, and one was 22 or something like that. And the elder Auntie Mata, she's 91, she says, "My son took me for a drive somewhere last year, and he came around the car and he opened the door for me, and then he reached to help me out of the car. And as he was helping me out of the car, I said to him, you would think I was an old woman or something." And he said, "Mama, you're 90." She said, "It's the first moment I actually thought of myself as being an old woman."
Wow.
Because her son said, "Mama, you're 90. Of course, I'm helping you out of the car if you need a little help." And so that's the thing. Like, we don't ever feel like we're old necessarily. And we feel like we're still vibrant beings that want to share what life is for us. And so what I was going to say about that, about me being a grandmother, it's vitally important to me, those relationships with my grandchildren. And in the last 2 years with the pandemic, I don't get to see them hardly as at all, because I'm immune compromised and everything. So I have to be extremely careful. And it really actually is breaking my heart. Yeah. It's really breaking my heart. And I miss it so much. So I encourage all of you young parents out there, parents of any age, with children of any age, please help to foster those relationships with the elders in your children's lives and in your lives. Take that time, whether it's with the grandparents or, like Serena said, the great aunties and great uncles, or the landlady who lives downstairs, and your child is the bright light in their life. Like, I really, really encourage you to know how much of a difference that's going to make. And not only in the elder's life, but in the child's life as well.
Yeah. Or even volunteering at a nursing home. I did Absolutely. That. And I remember a lot of ladies there, and they were so cute, and they always had so much fun interacting with us young high schoolers. And one was a model, and every time I would come, she'd say, "Oh my gosh, let me show you how to do the model walk." And I'd get up and she'd tell me do this, and she had so much fun, and I had so much fun. But
so fun.
Yes, there's so much each generation and the older generations have to share with our younger generations, and it's beautiful. And even if it's FaceTime, take 10 minutes to FaceTime, or even writing a letter, because the older generation would love getting a letter.
Oh, yes.
The younger generation probably doesn't even know how to write out a letter. Or
that's right.
Yeah, address, how to put the address, where to put it, the stamps.
Yes.
I learned that from my grandparents, thankfully.
But yeah, when I traveled in Europe as a 19, 20-year-old, we didn't have computers. We didn't have the internet yet. And my Amma wrote to me. I'm sure she wrote to me every week, and I wrote back to her. And that's how you kept in touch with your family when you were traveling. I was traveling for a year. And letter writing, oh gosh, I want to bring back letter writing. It's so fun to get a letter in the mailbox.
Oh yeah.
It's so fun. And that definitely definitely lifts up the spirits of the elders too, because that's from their lifetime.
Yeah. And it's such a good physical memory to hold on to. And sometimes the older people have such beautiful penmanship. My grandma went to Catholic school, and I was always so jealous of her penmanship. And just seeing it, it's so beautiful and such a good memory to hold on to.
Yeah. And like you say, just seeing it, like when you get our letter in the mailbox, you look to see whose handwriting it is. And you know, in a split second, without looking at the return address, you know who it's from.
Yes.
If it's from somebody in your, in your world that you know the handwriting of, that's a beautiful feeling. And I actually feel sad for kids who aren't going to experience that. Maybe I'll start writing letters to my grandsons since they live on the same island as me, but I hardly ever get to see them. Let me see if that might be something fun to do.
Yeah, I think that's always fun. I'm sure they would love getting a letter in the mail. I signed up for Burger King mail when I was little, and I felt so special getting a letter from Burger King.
What? I don't even know what that is, but I do remember having a pen pal.
Yeah.
Having pen pals in other countries. That was a really cool thing that happened for decades. It's gone out of time now with emails and texting and everything.
There are groups that do pen pal things, though. I don't really understand pen pals. I tried to do it with my cousin, and I fell off. It was my fault, but we did a little back and forth. She's a lot younger, not a lot, but she's in college now. I'm 27, so but she really enjoyed it, and she would always write back to me, and it was cute. And then I fell off, unfortunately. I hope this encourages you to embrace your elders, for you to bring them around and let your kids experience them more, fill them up with joy by bringing them around your kids. And it's really the most beautiful connection. I used to say, I can't wait to be a grandparent. Forget about my kids. I can't wait to be a grandparent, because there's just such a special bond between kids and grandparents. It's very really different than parents.
And just on that note too, the last couple of years, so many of us have felt such an increased sense of isolation. And so write letters to them, whether they're living home or whether they're living in a care place, it doesn't matter. Write them a letter, get your children, and the children could just draw a picture. Just draw a picture. You can ask them, what's the picture about? What do you want me to tell Grandpa the picture is about? Or just, do you want to tell me anything about the picture? And they may say no, and they may say blah, 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 blah. It might have a whole story with it, Or if they're too young, like your little one, just draw some colors and just pop a letter in the mail that says, thinking of you. This is, my whoever's drawing for you today. And that would be such a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. And yeah, we do hope that this inspires you to have the grandparents, or at least the elders, around you in the lives of your family and your little ones.
All right. Take care.
My grandparents were my everything, so I really enjoy Grandparents' Day. I enjoy celebrating my grandparents because they're my world. And I hope, if you didn't know Grandparents' Day was a thing, now you know. And this year it's a little more special for you. So here are my 3 takeaways from this episode. Number 1, make sure you nourish the relationships between your kids and their grandparents. It is very beneficial, and mama, you're going to get a break. If you can drop off your kids at their grandparents' house and just leave them there and go have some you time, do it. Let them make those memories with their grandparents. Let them get that whole experience, and they both benefit, so it's good. Drop them off and don't have mom guilt. Number 2, ask them all the questions. Get your kids to ask them the questions. Let them have all those conversations and let them just share, because they both can learn so much. Your kids can teach their grandparents how to use the iPad, And your parents can teach your kids a lot about what it was like for them growing up. Oh, and get the recipes. Get all the recipes, write them down, teach them to your kids, and that's something beautiful that gets passed down. And number 3, write them a letter. Get your kids to write their grandparents a letter. It will be so nice for them to get something in the mail. I do it to my grandparents. And you'll teach your kids how to put an address on an envelope, how to put a stamp on, and yeah, they'll really enjoy it. So I hope you have a very happy Grandparents' Day.
Thanks for being here with us in our virtual village. Hit subscribe so you're notified about our newest episodes each week.
And hey, did you get something from today's episode? I know I sure did. Be kind. Hit that share button and send it to your mama friends so they can benefit from it too.
Also, by leaving us a review, you will be helping more parents out there to find answers to the questions that might be keeping them up at night.
We'd love you to follow us on Instagram and our Facebook page at The Village Parenting Pod.
And we'd love you to direct message us. Let us know your questions that we could address in future episodes and how we can serve you better.
This podcast is sponsored by the Singing Alma's private parent coaching and workshop offerings. We also now have a Buy Me a Coffee option for a fun way that you could support this podcast. Link is in the show notes.